All right, back here with Stephen Thiel today. We're talking HubSpot Salesforce integration issues. How are you, Stephen?
Good, good. How are you?
Fantastic, fantastic. So, in the past, we've talked about some of the issues on more of the technical side, right? How do we configure this? How do we configure that? All good stuff. Today, though, I want to talk about some issues that happen on the human side because typically, as we've said many times, marketing teams drift to HubSpot, sales teams drift to Salesforce. We connect these two together to unite both teams. We've also probably put out 2,000 videos about the everlong tension between sales and marketing. It's something we talk about a lot here. And something we've come to realize a big issue that we've seen, and it happens a lot on the reporting side, is when those teams, instead of using these tools and this integration for wonderful, harmonious alignment, start using the data as a weapon. And if you go and you take, if you explore the that tension we always talk about, marketing, sales, what does marketing say? Oh, sales isn't selling enough of the great leads that we're sending. Sales always says marketing's not sending good enough leads. That's your, the most basic complaint that both of them give to one another. They now have these tools within each of their systems that they can go run off on the side to create reports that maybe prove their points a little bit and can make the other team look bad. So tell me a little bit about what opportunities exist for these teams to use the data as a weapon. And then let's talk about how they should not be using this data as a weapon.
Yeah, fortunately, something we've been seeing a little too often, especially when, for whatever reason, when the market side tends to sometimes take ownership of the integration since it's built out on that side. But on the marketing side, like they'll use it, hey, we're driving leads, with what's happening with them, and they'll try to, dive into, okay, speed to lead is kind of maybe is that an area for improvement. Are we not having consistent follow up with leads? Are leads just maybe like sitting, stalling out because sales rep for a reason doesn't deem them to be as high quality as the marketing side thinks they are. And something I see a lot with the marketing is like they'll try to like go one by one through the leads, and I see they marked it as invalid data and like try to cross. It looks like they actually do have a valid phone number or email. So like really getting into like the minutia of it, because marketing wants to drive leads. Like they, depending on their setup, if it's more of a vanity metric, like they want to drive leads. Doesn't always matter on the marketing side. If the end goal should always be leads that convert into SPLs and opportunities. But there are still lots of companies that focus more on like the vanity metric of it and how many leads is marketing driving. And then when the sales side or leadership's going, hey, why aren't we converting out for these leads? That's when the reporting can kind of be weaponized a little bit, instead of using it as an opportunity to like take a step back. Is it an internal process issue or is it a lead quality issue?
Yeah, and I think we have a unique perspective, right? As you and I do sales for an agency that started as a marketing agency, right? So we see a lot of this push and pull, and we're in meetings where we're going, okay, well, what's up with this lead? And we go, it wasn't really a lead. Like they filled out a form, but they have no budget, they have no whatever. It's like, oh, well, is that an MQL? And so I know for years, maybe we've been ranting about how pointless MQLs can be in some scenarios, not all scenarios. Don't attack me. But I think what you see within this integration is it's an opportunity for each team to kind of prove their worth to one another. And I think if you're not on the same page ahead of time, again, you're going to use that opportunity maybe more selfishly than you'd want or even admit, because with data and with data flowing within into systems, we always want the numbers to back up what we're doing. Marketing wants to say we sent all these leads, we sent all of them. Why? Why didn't they? Why are they not customers right now? And sales goes, well, when I looked at this company, we have a very high threshold of, 500 users or more. and this company had 2 people in it, and so I didn't call them. And now you've got 2 reports that both make it look like everybody's doing their job, and yet you're not getting the growth that you want. And so even with the tech talking to each other, even with the teams trying to work harmoniously, the tension is still there. And I think it's because nobody's really wrong in that scenario, right? Like we've worked it enough to know that marketing is doing their job. They're trying to get that right message, the right person at the right time, and get them to take that action to get into the database, to get into the pipeline. And then sales is doing everything they can to get the right customer to come on board and sell them, into becoming, a paying customer, right? So given all these tools, given the fact that data is a weapon, without us just saying what we always say, which is you've got to be aligned before you even get the tech connected. How can these teams use the systems to maybe build better reporting, or maybe more, I don't want to say earnest reporting, but unbiased reporting for each of these teams?
Yeah, for us, like when we're doing these types of projects, like we will typically build, one CRM needs to be the source of truth. Like we've got HubSpot and Salesforce. They can't both be the source of truth. Sure, they're passing data back and forth, but one still needs to be looked at as the source of truth. Is it HubSpot? Is it Salesforce? Because they do, even though the integration is there, they do look at things sometimes a little bit differently. Terminology is different in the systems. Metrics can be a little bit different in the system. So picking a source of truth and building out dashboards in it, if it's HubSpot or if it's Salesforce, building out dashboards that both teams have access to, both teams recognize this is our source of truth. We're working out of this, and getting more alignment on like the actual types of metrics we want to be tracking. Sure, they all, each department has their own KPIs, but how do those feed into the growth for the company? Because really, the beauty of this integration, especially for clients that are running any sort of paid ads, is that when both marketing and sales are using it efficiently and the leads are coming through, they're syncing. The sales team is updating the lead status or the life cycle stage. Being able to have accurate data that we can then feed back into ad networks improves everybody's life, because it then makes it easier for companies that are running paid ads, whether it's Meta, LinkedIn, or Google, to optimize their ad campaigns for the types of leads that the data shows us are more likely to convert, and removes a little bit of that bias. But to get there, we need both teams using the system, in a cohesive manner, and not kind of weaponizing the reporting, and both being, understanding this is our source of truth. This is what we're tracking. And if this is wrong, then we have a problem, because then we're going to be feeding incorrect data in this example into the ad platforms. And then that's a lose-lose situation for everybody.
It's funny. We started this with this idea of the issue being the human component and people using data as a weapon to make their department look better. But I think the core issue is what you just got to, right? Choosing which is actually the source of truth. That is a bigger issue, because you do have 2 teams that live in 2 systems. They want different things. They know they need to talk to each other, but then there still has to be one king, right? There's only one king. There's only one true source of truth. This is the winner. And if you don't have that, or if you don't want to admit that it's not the one that you're in all the time, then it's probably going to cause more problems than it is, help you solve those problems. So what can companies do? What's the best way for them to understand how to choose which of these 2 to be the source of truth?
Yeah, for some companies, it's an easier decision, because for some companies, there might be outside integrations that are feeding into one or the other, whether it's native or through like an API. And then in which case, that's typically going to be your source of truth, because you have data coming in from other sources. We see this a lot, where clients are API feeding data into Salesforce that the sales team needs, but maybe not as relevant on the marketing side, so it doesn't get passed over. Um, and then we know Salesforce has to be the source of truth. In other cases, it's really kind of looking at, taking a step back, looking at the integration. If all the data points we need are coming in, or syncing in a two-way fashion, a lot of the times HubSpot tends to be the source of truth, just because the attribution reporting tends to be a little bit tighter on like leads that are coming in the door, and then being able to accurately measure that. But it's definitely a company by company kind of use case, on which ultimately is going to be the source of truth.
Yeah, and I think, there's some resource allocation that comes in that decision too, right? Because if you make HubSpot your source of truth because of its robust API and its desire to be lean and to make that, it easy for you to be able to have your systems talking with one another, you probably are a little less reliant on a solution partner to, I mean, you're still going to need obviously a big setup, but as we know, Salesforce becomes a beast, right? And all the custom development that can go into that is really good for the partners in their ecosystem, but might be so convoluted for the customer that they are going to get stuck in it if they're not careful. Whereas HubSpot is going to be a little bit more flexible and you're going to be able to, maneuver in and out and, be able to evolve the system as your source of truth without having to go to developers to do a six-figure project every time you want to make a change. So that's probably something people should be considering when they're deciding which of these is going to be the central source of truth. But typically what we see though is it you're kind of living in one world or the other, right? You've either lived in that Salesforce world where it's been custom developed and that's just that's where you're going to be, or you've kind of got a little bit more going on in the HubSpot environment and sales is just kind of off on an island doing Salesforce stuff. And then that in that scenario, you're able to utilize HubSpot more as your source of truth. So what else, what else do customers need to know about choosing one or the other? I feel like it does sound like a lot of times the choices has kind of been made based off historical use. But let's say you're not happy with your choice. Let's say historically everything came up through Salesforce and you don't love that being the central source of truth and you now want it to be HubSpot. How can you make that shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's really taking a step back and looking at the data in that case. Like, is the integration supporting passing everything back from the sales side into HubSpot? If we're capturing all that sales activity, we're capturing all that, all that revenue reporting that we need, then it is very easy to make HubSpot the source of truth. And then there's looking at, what other tools are being used. Is it a case where there's, an LMS tied in that's pulling or pushing data? Do you have a data warehouse using a Snowflake or something that's only connected to one of the systems but not both? What is finance using? Are there ERPs involved? Which obviously 9 times out of 10 they can be connected to both systems, but there's sometimes an ease of use with connecting it to HubSpot or Salesforce. Really looking at the bigger tech stack and trying to figure out where do they each come into play. But a lot of it does come down to like user comfort level, like the people who are going to be using this to pull that reporting, whether it's department head, senior leadership on a smaller company level, the CEO, which system are they most comfortable operating out of? And then we can kind of work backwards. Like if they're comfortable in HubSpot, cool. Comfortable in Salesforce, cool. We can find a way to get the data into either one of those. Comfort level, I think, does play a big part into this, in addition to like any other outside tech that needs to be taken into account when determining, source of truth. But the beauty of the integration is, we can, assuming the subscription level supports it, even with custom objects now, like we can pass all that data back and forth in a two-way manner. So, depending on, again, subscription, like that does come into play on the HubSpot side. If you want custom objects, you need an enterprise subscription on HubSpot. And if you're using custom objects in Salesforce, maybe you don't want to pay for that on the HubSpot side. So then Salesforce ends up being the source of truth.
All right, I love it. So if you're watching this video, your HubSpot and Salesforce integration is not going the way you want it to. You're trying to figure out the best way of moving forward. Uh, Ask yourself this: one, which is our single source of truth? Two, do we want it that way? From there, you're probably going to be able to start unraveling a lot of things that are going to make some of the answers a little bit more clear and hopefully provide more clarity to both of your teams working in both systems and ensuring that people are only using this data in the most honest, earnest way and never as a weapon. All right. So thanks so much, Stephen. This was a lot of fun.
Appreciate it.
That's it for today. If you like what you see,
give us a thumbs up and make sure you hit subscribe so you can see our latest videos as soon as they drop. We really appreciate you watching. See you next time.